Do we want to start recording, Joanne? Or,
I just started it. Good morning.
oh, thank you.
Yes, and so Brad is our IT extraordinaire, and he will be assisting us today with keeping our recording on as we're going through and any technical problems that anyone might have. So with that, I'd like to say good morning, farmers. And my name is Jeanette Jeffrey, and I am a Family and Consumer Sciences agent in Anne Arundel and Prince George's County. And before we get started, I'd like to also introduce you to the two co-creators of this program. Kayla Griffith is the Nutrient Management Specialist in Anne Arundel County, and she's also a fifth-generation farmer in Anne Arundel County. And we also have Dave Myers, who is our speaker for today. And Dave is our ag agent in Anne Arundel and Prince George's counties. And so we welcome you to today's Good Morning Farmers session. And we hope that you enjoy your time so much here that you will also share this information with your friends and family in the ag community and encourage them to also enroll. Right now, we've got 44 registrants, and we're hoping to get more folks coming in as the new year. Right now, we know it's kind of difficult time of year of people getting together, particularly this early in the morning during the holiday season. But we really encourage you to help promote, and the more the merrier that we can gather together. So I'm going to read off, because I've got the great pleasure today of introducing Dave. And so I'm going to read off a little bit of his background for you. And so you may see that his name, if it's ever an email, is Ronald David Myers, but we call him Dave. And Dave was the agronomist for the U.S. Naval Academy Dairy Farm from 1980 to 1997. And while working at the Naval Academy Dairy, he earned in 1983 a BS degree in agronomy, crop science, and in 1996 a master's degree in agronomy, weed science from the University of Maryland. And since 1997, Dave has served as a faculty member for the University of Maryland Extension as the area extension educator, agriculture, and principal agent in Anne Arundel and Prince George's counties. Dave also serves as the Anne Arundel County Extension Director, or head served, from 2006 to 2013, and acting assistant director and agriculture program leader for the University of Maryland Extension from 2013 to 2018. His extension program responsibilities include all field crop and livestock agriculture with a research emphasis on fruit and vegetable production and pesticide use and safety. So Dave is just a fountain of knowledge, and I've been with the University of Maryland for 2 years, and Dave is my go-to in our office. If I ever have a question, he's the man. So this is a really nice collaborative between ag, Family and Consumer Sciences, and Nutrient Management. So thank you, Dave, for presenting today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I just want to say good morning, everyone. And that's way too long of an introduction, so we're just going to say extension agent from now on, agriculture, Jeanette. And so you should see my screen come up here. Let me clear a few things, and we'll get the slideshow up here. Okay, well, machinery, something that's kind of dear to my heart. I really enjoy working on machinery, and farm machinery has been even my pastime pleasure is working on old machines, antiques and things. And I think back, I know Kayla said she's 5 generations. I know I can go back 6 great grandfathers that farmed in the area here in West Virginia. Well, of course, it would have been Virginia at that time. There was no West Virginia until after the our Civil War. The machinery breakdown, everything mechanical is subject to failure, and that was my grandfather's favorite slogan. And I've said it so much over the years that now my wife thinks I created it and it's my slogan. But it is true. We know that when it comes to machinery, that well, even if it's new, it's still subject to failure, unfortunately. And so we just have to keep that in mind as we kind of try to reduce the stress. And that's what we're going to look at today, is trying to reduce the stress that occurs when we're actively farming and things are already time cramped to try. The next thing you know, something breaks down or we tear it up. It's not always because the machine's fault. A lot of times it's our own fault that something is tore up in the field. So let's try to reduce that Here's 1918 in Anne Arundel County. This is the first extension report from Henry Whiteford, our first agricultural agent in 1918 in Anne Arundel County. And the reason why I put this up here is because in this report, not too far into the report, he talked about machines. Now think about this, 1918, 100 years ago, plus one or two. And he said there was 24 tractors in the county. We've come a long way in 100 years. So we've gone from, he was talking about how he was trying to promote, the USDA had a program to promote mechanization of the farm at that time. And so they were really going around trying to work with dealers and farmers, trying to get these tractors in the fields. And he said that, wrote a little synopsis there of his progress in that area. But 24 tractors, of course, we knew that at that time horses were doing most of the work. We still had machinery, and we still had breakdowns, and we still had problems. When I was dairy farming at the Naval Academy Dairy Farm, and really interesting, I don't know if, can you see, we can't see my error, can you? I have to bring up a little pointer here. Let me see, I get the pointer here.
We can see the arrow. Dave.
Oh, you can actually see the, that's right, it's on my desktop. Okay, right here is the, let's see if I can see it right here. Yeah, that building right there is the extension office. Right, so our Anne Arundel County Extension Office. So you see that little water tank right there in the parking lots out there. But this is 846 acres of farmland that's still wonderful that we have a chance to enjoy here in Anne Arundel County. This is the U.S. Naval Academy dairy property. And you can see it's all strip cropped. And this is back during my 10 years as agronomist there. So, and of course, that's where I learned the art of machinery maintenance. I started there when I was 19, but my grandfathers were working on me long before that. And so I understood machinery and how important it was. Interesting thing, I put my mission statement there. You see that? Farmer mission statement. Raise crop to feeds cows. That's what I did for 18 years. And I loved it, actually. I still wake up sometimes in a fret that I need to go feed the cows. And that's 23 years ago. So it really does stick with you. But you can see a lot of machinery there in the way of, you have to harvest that crop, you have to store that crop, and then you have to make it available for feed. And that takes a lot of mechanization. And so we're all the time working as farmers and everything on the farm. Here's just some of the activities that go into some of that harvesting and feeding to what we call a total mixed ration. And so, farming is a science, and it's very complex. And the machinery that goes along with this science is very complex. And now it's even, used to be that we didn't have to deal with computers, but now everything's computerized. So it's gotten as complex as the vehicles that we drive, on the farm. And of course, a lot of people would argue that that's been a wrong way to go. We've made things, even on the farm level, some of our machinery too complex. But it is important, because if we want to do things as accurately as get down to those percentages of feed mixtures and nutrition and all that, then we need that kind of precision, if you will, and the ability to do that. So farm machinery is really very important. So here's what I want us to think about. Here's our questions. We'll come back to these questions, but I want these questions in your mind. The discussion question that I have as we go through this whole presentation is: everyone on the farm aware of and addressing essential machinery maintenance to avoid breakdowns and losses incurred? And I also would put in there to avoid injury and to avoid damage to machinery, not just breakdowns. So that's one thing that's very important to us to think about when it comes to this machinery, is that it is essential to us being profitable. And we want everyone on the farm that uses this machinery to have that same understanding that how essential this machinery is and how maintenance is so critical. And so we want to avoid breakdowns and those losses. The last thing you want is that baler out there with that plunger, that knife to come separated, or bearing to go bad in that right there where you're making that baling operation. So that's all part of maintenance. Now, when we get into maybe a little bit further discussion beyond the presentation, the two questions that I would like for us to ask to ourselves and to address are: what are your strategies for dealing with farm machinery breakdowns on the farm? And then how can you reduce the stress and losses when these machinery breakdowns occur? And that's how we handle it and how we react to it when a breakdown. And I've seen all kinds of reactions, from complete people exploding and losing it and wanting to fight to just kind of rolling with the punches. And so it really can be very stressful. And the last thing you want is not have a plan in place for dealing and some strategies to overcome this. So let's look at a few of those strategies. And I want you to think of another a little different concept about this. know your responsibilities to the machines. Now, these machines don't have feelings, believe me, they'll take your life in a second and think nothing of it. But at the same point, we do have responsibility to them, to that machine in its operation and care, and so that it can perform what we purchased it to do. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the shop, how critical that shop area is. There have to be tools there for your employees, yourselves, to be properly work on this machinery. You're going to need a library, and I can remember we had an extensive library. I wish I would have had some pictures of the old library and things that we had just in the machine shop. And it would have all the technical manuals. And a lot of times we would actually order, when we order a new piece of machinery, we would order the technician's manual, not just the operator's manual. But you go back to that company and you say, next thing you know, you get like 3 or 4 volume set for one tractor. And you got every bit of information that you need at your fingertips of that. Of course, now things are online and libraries can be online, but I still find those sometimes that hard written record to be a very useful thing when it comes to understanding a complex machine. So the tools in the library, that shop needs to be clean. It needs to be areas where you can actually do some good work. And of course, this time of the year, everyone kind of gravitates to the shop. That was always our meeting place in the farm. You come together at the shop, you know what, you kind of get your orders for the day, head out and do the work and come back. And of course, if there's breakdowns, you're probably back at the shop. We had a storeroom at the farm too. Again, I wish we would have had amazing pictures of that because it was a Navy Academy dairy farm. I just remember the storeroom. They used to have a supply officer that would sit down there. He would be there at 6:45 in the morning. And you were supposed to come down and get your parts that you needed for the day between 6:45 and 7, which is the time that you started work. Now, you know how regimented military is. so, so you can imagine how these superintendents were. And the interesting thing was the supply officer didn't stay there till 7:15. So he was only there for about a short half hour. And if you would get parts after that, so you had to know what you needed for that day. If you were the mechanic working on your machine, what you anticipated what you would need. And so, of course, that we kind of got rid of that supply officer and had the storeroom available for us, so there wouldn't be any stress over that. The spare parts are something you have to have some inventory of. You need those common belts that are going to break down, those common bearings, knives, whatever that spare part is. You need to have those on hand because you want to be able to make those really simple repairs fairly quickly and get back into the field. And then, of course, any normal maintenance items. We had a complete oil shed, within different oils, all the different hydraulics and different types of oils that you need. And so grease and all those things, very important. The storerooms, very important part of that shop. The other thing is the machinery shed itself, protection from the elements. These machines they're not the old, I got old tractors. Those things can sit out in the weather. Of course, if you get the old magneto sweat, you might get in trouble. But now with the electronics and things, you want to have good protection for this equipment. The day where you kind of park the old equipment out along the fence row and then grabbed on it, throw the grease to it and go back to the field are kind of over with this high technology, this high and very technical type of equipment. In fact, I used to think, boy, how did we ever get to the point where we had to have white cotton gloves on to change a light bulb on a tractor? But that's where we're at, right? So, so it is important. Other important things, again, responsibility to your machines and to them operating so that they're not as subject. I guess what we're trying to do is eliminate that subject to failure to as limited as possible events as possible. And dealer support, parts and information, that's where you need that dealer support. And you need their technicians a lot of times. So have good relations with those people that you purchase from and right up front with them, be up front with them. Hey, I'm going to buy from you, but here's what I want. I'm going to be able to call and I'm going to want to be able to talk to a technician, and I want to be able to get the information that I need to make whatever repairs I feel that I'm comfortable with making. And so, again, that's very important. Those conversations need to be right up front when you're purchasing that machinery, and only work with the dealers that'll work with you. Just be real blunt with them. And, I was always, when we're negotiating, the deal wasn't going the way you want, you say, well, you walk away. You say, well, you're gonna have to sharpen your pencil on that one a little bit. We'll come back to you if so it is always good to talk to and work with a number of dealers and let them know that you're working with a number of dealers and to let them know how their service is for you. The farm worker training is the last thing I want to mention. as part of this idea of this responsibility that you have to being able to maintain machinery properly and make sure you reduce that failure and breakdown. We need to make sure that the workers that we're working with are training, that we're mentors to those skills they need. We want to make sure that maybe we take time for them to maybe go and take some classes. I mean, a lot of times these dealers will set up some really good classes on maybe like something simple as planner workshop day. And so that you can go out and work and learn everything you need to know about fine tuning that corn planter. And so give your mentors the skills to your farm workers, make sure, and yourself, right? And then make sure that they understand this responsibility they have to maintenance. And I don't know how often, how that got drilled into me, but you become good at it. You remember, just about how often that grease gun has to be in action. And we used to grease in the morning, we'd grease at lunchtime, and then we grease sometimes before we put the machinery away while the bearings were still warm. And so again, that's all real important to making sure those machines last as long as they possibly can. And then, of course, safety is very important with farm worker training. When we're working on machines, it's very easy to be fatigued. It's very easy to get hurt. Crushed fingers, pretty easy. All kinds of sprains, moving around machinery. So it's tough. And we got to stress and got to make sure that shop is as safe as it possibly can. Clutter free. It's nice to have workstations for the different farm workers that they're responsible for, and keep the place tidy and neat. It'll reduce injury, and it'll make it a much more pleasurable place to work. There's a lot of ways to look at Lancaster farming. Everyone should be getting their Lancaster farmer to purchase machinery. I just want to go through just a few slides here, just kind of think about all these parts that we're talking about here that need some type of maintenance. 3-point hitch, you got the power takeoff systems, hydraulic systems, remote sensing, cab monitors, controllers, all these things we're just going to be constantly aware of. Watch, listen to machinery. What's the major limitation of a 3-point hitch equipment? That is typically it's the weight factor. How much can you possibly mount onto a particular tractor? And we're going to make sure we have those weight specifications right. We're not overloading a small tractor with a very large 3-point implement, so they're properly sized. And of course, hooking them up takes a little help sometimes. And so, of course, it's easy to get hurt sometimes with that. So we be careful with that 3-point equipment. Calibration and adjustment. Pay close attention to the operator's manual. Set the machine for field conditions because they are highly variable based on soil types, how wet the soil is, what kind of cover crops, residues you're dealing with. Stop if the outcome is not desirable. I don't know how many times I've gone to the field and seen someone that just was too stubborn to stop, and say, hold it, this machine's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. The corn seed's not in the ground at the right depth or whatever it is. And so we need to do something different here. And it might require added attachments. On-farm engineering might have to be required. I have seen some really amazing things occur to make a machine do what it's designed to do. That doesn't automatically happen. And that's where those technicians are involved. You buy a piece of equipment, make sure that technician comes out with you that first day and goes through all those things with all the people that are going to operate that machine, and make sure they're very well of that machine. So what's the most important item a farmer should take to the field for equipment adjustment? And it's not that big red hammer. Of course, that big red hammer come in handy. It's the operator's manual, right? We need to have good. Of course, now on the phone, you might be able to just look it up on the computer and Google YouTube about how to set up this particular machine that you're working on. Here's just a good picture of a corn planter that's set up properly. It's putting the seed in the ground through a fairly heavy cover crop and residue, and there's no questions that's not doing the job. With the monitors in that cab, we know exactly that the seed's going in the ground right where we want it. And so again, it is amazing, the machines and what they're able to do. Here's a drill, same thing, going through some heavy residue. You can see it's cutting right through there, nice and clean, good gauge wheel system, putting the seed in the soil, covering up. I always said you're not really a farmer if you don't know how to put the seed in the soil and cover it with the exact amount of soil it's supposed to have. That's planting. Anything short of that is not doing a very good job. So machines we have do an excellent job. They take a lot of maintenance, a lot of repair parts. How many hours will that, or how many acres will that drill take before it needs to be rebuilt? Typically about 2,500. you need to be thinking about, some new opening disc and things. So again, 3,000, 4,000, depending on the sill type, it's probably wore out, got to replace most of the parts. So they don't last forever. And there's a lot of things we have to do maintenance wise. Here's my first no-till alfalfa field, 1989. And so again, we know, well, we can use these machines to do some pretty amazing things. Another nice shot of alfalfa field I planted. And this is a picture taken 1992. You see this nice drilled rows, good quality feed, and all with that attributed to those machines. Maintenance is battling dirt and friction, and we get plenty of it out there. So we got to keep that equipment clean, and we got to be able to spot trouble. If it's not clean, we can't spot it. We're most likely to ignore it. So we, bring that machinery in, clean it, inspect it. While it's operating, feel around for the different bearing surfaces, make sure nothing's getting hot. Lubricate and on schedule, and be real critical about that. A lot of times lubrication forces moisture out of bearings too, which again, we're talking about machinery. Sometimes it might sit a while out in the weather. I'm sure some manure spreader sits out there with quite a bit of manure and salts and things of that nature. So again, getting that moisture squeeze out of those bearings, getting grease in there, maintaining that is very critical. What are the symptoms of a failing part? Well, pretty much most things you're going to hear something. If you're paying attention, don't have the radio too loud, the cab closed. And you'll hear something. And then the next thing you'll know, you'll probably start to smell something. Or maybe you'll start to see smoke and maybe even fire. So again, heat's usually the number one symptom after noise. And so again, we should be able to be on top of these things. Of course, with machinery and this crunch time and the stress of farming, it all comes down to this narrow window concept. And that means you only have a certain amount of time to get a task done, and you got to plan accordingly. And so, it's nothing to go out there and you send the hay binds in the field, you start cutting out, in this case, alfalfa, you lay that down. How long is it going to take to get that alfalfa and the haylage or baleage or whatever you're going to do with it, or baled hay? So careful thought before heading to the field. Know how much time it takes to do a task, and always use that machinery to an economic maximum. And that, of course, maintenance is a critical part of that economic maximum. So we measure machinery being used. How can you do that? And that is paying attention to the amount of time it takes for those tasks, and start to attribute the amount of time to the cost of that machinery. And before you know it, you can come up with a pretty good schedule of how much it costs you to put that machine in the field. And is it paying for itself? And what is that maintenance interval that's necessary? Forage harvest equipment and mowing. Here's just some breakdown of some parts that we have to deal with. Again, some of these parts you're going to want to have in the storeroom, and think about how complicated just something as simple as a mowing machine can be. The guard register, or if it's a hay bind, if it's a disc bind, those disc knives, they need to be sharpened, they need to be replaced. Crimper rolling tension, very important. Reel adjustment, shoe adjustment, swathing, windrowing. What is the advantage of windrowing hay? Well, a lot of times it allows you to dry the ground sometimes, and then be able to spread the hay back out onto dry ground. So increase drying time sometimes with windrowing. So very important parts, or to reduce leaf shatter if you're doing alfalfa. So a lot of important things to know about something simple as cutting hay. Of course, baling, whether we're going large round bales or square bales, all those different mechanisms in those balers, especially in those square balers with the knotters and all. Understanding the timing and that's critical, and having shear bolts and all the things that you need to get out there and keep going. It's again, it can be a lot of fun. It can be rewarding, but when a breakdown occurs, all the fun goes away, and so then we're left with a lot of stress. So we got to get the hay off. There's a nice picture here in Anne Arundel County getting some hay off, orchard grass hay off, in a very timely fashion. Of course, we get into spraying equipment. There are a whole list of different things when it comes to spraying equipment, and understand all that plumbing and everything that goes along with that. Animal handling equipment, a lot of feeding systems, fencing, watering, a lot more equipment that needs attention to. Just knowing how many months a year I can pasture is a pretty critical thing to think about. And then, of course, storing feed for this time of the year when there's a little less to eat out there. Something as simple as plowing. You start to look at all the different things just in the art of plowing, and that's why they have plowing contests. It's not the easiest thing to do. Anyone that's ever done plowing know that every time you go out, it's a little different day, and plows depending on the soil condition at the time, the moisture level, things of that nature, what you're trying to plow under. It can be quite challenging. Of course, if everything's set right and in proper working order, it can do a wonderful job. So I put this question: why is proper plowing so important? Because if it's done wrong, it can damage that field for 5 to 10 years if it's done wrong. So again, one mistake out there can really hurt you, really make you suffer. So again, understanding everything that you need to do just about plowing. So we just don't send novices out there. That's another thing that's very important with machinery, is don't expect your new farm worker to be able to have the same seasoned knowledge that you have as a farmer, and don't send them out there without going right out there with them and making sure they're off to a good start and doing what they need to do. And if they make sure there's going to be any troubles that arise out there, that you're ready to teach. Disking, same thing. Disking, understanding those discs and leveling. I just put a little question there. What action is lost if the disc is not kept clean? Well, you really don't have a disc if you don't clean the disc. The concaves start to fill up with soil. If you're not out there scraping them, hammering them off, you really end up with just a roller. You don't end up with a disc. And so again, disking is meant to move soil laterally and to level the soil and to break up the soil into a much finer condition. Of course, roller packing, there's a lot of reasons when we get into tillage to make a firm seed bed, to reduce that soil moisture loss. And so conservation, here's a field I worked up in '87. It's like picture perfect. That field was plowed, it was disked, and it was rolled. And you're probably looking at about, at that point there, it's seeded with a brilliant seeder, and it's just about perfect. You can stand back and be proud of something like that. But that's probably about, you're talking about 8 passes with tillage equipment to get to that, right? And so again, that's because we're looking to get, again, using that machinery to get to a result like that is pretty actually pretty rewarding. And so here's me just testing my work as my footprints in 1987. I'm testing the firmness of that field to make sure if I don't sink down any further than that, then as I walk across that field, I know I made that field perfect for that alfalfa to get off to a perfect start. So again, that machinery is pretty amazing. It is an art to it, to using it, and it's all about understanding that piece of machine and the maintenance of it. Very fine seed
Dave?
bed, shallow. Yes.
May I interrupt you for just a second? I've got a question here from Cheryl, wanting
Sure.
to know, what is the function of a share, suck, and plow frog?
Well, the frog is the part where everything attaches. The suck is the action that you have on the share, and you can set that. And you can also buy different shares and different plows, mold boards. So you can design the plow the way you want it. Of course, you got to know all those different components, and you wear out the shares, you replace the shares, and the mold boards wear out, you replace them. But you buy different types. If you have different soil, you need more suck, and you can do that by tipping the plow a little bit. Of course, any machine that you run in the field, it's designed to have the frame run level. And so, there's like I say, machinery setup and having it do what you want it to do is knowledge. It really is knowledge about that particular piece of machine and what it is capable of doing. Being a good plow, we call plowman, that's why they have competitions. It's because it's not as easy as you think to go out and to end up with that result that you just saw there. That's not an easy thing to do to end up as perfect as that, across a large area. That takes understanding of that equipment. Of course, vegetable and fruit, a lot of different equipment there too. Plasticulture, irrigation, trellising, high tunnels, greenhouses. It just gets more complex. The amount of equipment that we might get into vegetable and fruit production. Here's just an example of a reckoning. I called it a labor and burden reckoning, putting in the Upper Marlboro Research Vineyard in 2001 and 2002, the establishment years. We put in 634 hours on 1.12 acres. So consider that a large acre, just 1 acre. That's 634 hours. And there's the breakdown of all that work that went into establishing that vineyard, on an hourly basis and all the different tasks. And think about all the different machines that were involved in that. Just think if you went out there and one of those broke down, right? Because, you went out with something and any one of those machines that were involved in those processes, a tractor breakdown, a drill breakdown, a fertilizer breakdown, a post driver breakdown, an auger breakdown, all those things would just add up to the extra cost. So just the hours alone is 9,510. This is back in 2001, 2002, just to put in that 1 acre vineyard. And then you look at how much the materials cost, and you'll have well over $20,000 to $25,000 that acre vineyard in 2 years in cost of material and labor. So again, that's why maximizing that use of that labor is so critical, and machines can help us. So again, there's a lot of machinery involved in this process that you see here: the mowing, fertilizing, spraying, post-driving, augering, drilling into fescue. So even though there's a lot of hand labor, there's an awful lot of machinery labor there. Of course, combines are always the big one. We put a lot of money in combining those that are grain farmers. And here's an old combine we kept going at the Navy farm. And it was, did what it needed to do. And there's me in 1992 in Barley at the Naval Academy Dairy Farm. Pretty proud of a project there, rotating no-till barley into alfalfa. So that prompted us, I think. Jeanette, how did I do for time? I didn't even look at what time it is.
We're at 8:33,
Okay,
so
well, I'd like for us to have a discussion now about machinery. And so again, let's start with some questions. And the first question I would want to do is, we've kind of discussed here how essential machinery maintenance is. A lot to be concerned about out there. Whatever sector of agriculture you're involved in, there's going to be some type of machinery that you're going to be that'll be essential to what you do. Breakdowns are likely to occur. They're most likely going to occur, and they're going to occur when you least want them, unless you're really good on top of it with maintenance and have your farmers well trained. But reducing that stress will be knowing how to quickly recover. Now, I have had a breakdown on a combine or a baler that we didn't anticipate, and next thing you know, I'm in a truck, in the middle of the night, and I got the night warehouseman, the company willing to leave it on the docks for you. And you pick up the piece part in New Holland, Pennsylvania for a New Holland combine at 10 o'clock at night. You drive home and you get a few hours sleep, and you wake up in the morning, you put that part on there, and you get back in the field the next day. And that's, but knowing how and to deal with that is what's really, really critical. Another thing is safety. This machinery, again, it has no feelings. And they can take your life pretty quickly, or maim you for life. And I always count my blessings when I still have my 10 fingers. I don't know if you ever go to a farmer auction or where farmers gather, and you'll see that there's a lot of people that are missing fingers and hands and arms and legs. And so these machines, and still more, agriculture is still the number one highest fatality job out there, and it's these machines that take our lives. So the questions then are, what are strategies for dealing with farm machinery breakdowns on your farm? I want to hear some responses about what you do. And then how do you reduce the stress when the machinery breakdowns occur? So let's go into discussion, and let's see if we can't discuss this a little bit. Yes.
Dave, I put